Funding for To the Contrary provided by the Oak Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the L. Hibry Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
This week on To the Contrary. First, 2015 in review. How did women and people of color fare? Then, breastfeeding truths, myths, and battles. Behind the headlines, Jane Goodall on the impact of women's health on the animal world. Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the wild and crazy 2015. 2015 was a year of progress and regression across multiple fronts. For the first time in U.S. history, 2 women ran for major party presidential nominations. Hillary Clinton remains the overwhelming favorite to win the Democratic race. Carly Fiorina has garnered a mountain of media attention, but is still a long shot for the Republican nomination. Debate continues over abortion rights as more states pass laws devised to make access almost impossible. And the Supreme Court will rule on the constitutionality of a Texas case which effectively closed many of the state's clinics. On another front, the U.S. was downgraded on a list of 145 countries rated by the World Economic Forum for advancing gender equality, falling from the top 20 to number 28. And the U.S. fell to 74th on wage equality. As the UN came together to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Conference on Women, engaging men in the discussion was front and center with the He for She campaign. Immigration and race relations were also big issues in 2015. The Black Lives Matter movement, started by 3 moms, took off, with concerns over police brutality and the deaths of black men and women. And after a woman took part in the country's worst terrorist attack since 9/11, Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump stirred up controversy by suggesting a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants. So, Patricia Sosa, where do women and minority rights stand at the end of 2015 and as we go into 2016?
Well, obviously, it's a very mixed package of issues and situations. I happen to be optimistic, particularly after Hillary Clinton will become the next president of the United States.
I agree. It's been a tumultuous year with so many headlines about minorities and women and how many things have affected us negatively. But I tend to think that the rights that we have remained intact, and they will so next year.
I'm going to remain positive because I have to, but we definitely have our work cut out with us, especially with the rise of extremism in America and around the world.
Right, I agree with everybody else as well. Hopefully 2016 will be better, but again, this country, I mean, women and men do have the same rights. There's no right that a man has that a woman doesn't in this country, so I don't think it's as bad as they're trying to make it seem.
Is that true?
Well, the data doesn't show it.
I mean, you said one thing I must mention. You said just before we started taping that, Janet Yellen made this huge decision that came out this week, raised, interest rates for the first time in about a decade, almost a decade, and nobody was talking about the fact that a woman was chair of the Fed. So is that progress?
I think that's absolute progress, because why should her gender matter? She's a strong leader, somebody who's been appointed to this post and doing a great job. I mean, I shouldn't say that really, given I don't agree with her entirely on the policies, but great job in terms of being a leader.
But I want to take the discussion to the laws and the issues that impact the working class and the average person who you make laws for. And the data shows that there's a lot of inequality. As you mentioned, the International Economic Forum downgraded the United States from 20 to 28th. And one of the main reasons is because of the lack of representation of women in high positions of government. And, as a Democrat, I have to say Obama's not done the best job on that one, and he should take some responsibility for it. Also because of our laws in terms of parental leave, in terms of child care, and many laws that are mainstream laws in many industrial countries we don't have in the United States, and that impact tremendously women, particularly women with children.
And Ash, do you think that's going to change in 2016?
I think as the presidential race heats up, that paid family leave, especially if Hillary Clinton becomes a Democratic nominee, that might end up being an issue. I personally am against more government mandates and involvement, but I do think that there should be a way to encourage companies to do that. I think that incentives and anything like that might work, because I'm definitely not against it. I just don't want a government mandate.
Now, I want to switch topics, though, as I'm going to have to do as we go through all these. But on the tricky track issue of abortion, it seems like states keep adding more and more restrictions, that the right to access to abortion is much, much more limited than it was in '73 when Roe v. Wade came down and there were virtually no barriers in the first trimester.
I think what Republicans have sought out to do is protect the pro-life movement, which they feel is really getting a slap in the face given all the happenings of last year with the Planned Parenthood scandal of selling the parts of these babies. And to many who have been committed to pro-life, they feel that their views are in danger and they're being infringed upon by the government.
So that allegation was found to be false. And I think if you look just at the domestic politics surrounding abortion and women's health in this country consistently, I mean, really Planned Parenthood has become the symbol of embodying kind of all the access to abortion
and even birth control, which is being attacked by conservatives and Republicans.
And the problem here is it's not equal everywhere. Now you live in California, you live in New York. It unfortunately is impacting the states with the largest, poorest communities, impacting communities like the Latino community with high birthing rates. And it's not a good outcome in terms of not only women's health, but also economic issues.
And yet, the NGOs working on against teen pregnancy have made great strides in the last couple of years. Why is that?
Well, because again, in communities that they're allowed, they're giving the right education, which is don't have sex, but if you're going to have sex, do have access to contraceptives.
I think the Bush years of abstinence-only education, completely declining, has been very good as far as women's health goes.
We also have to recognize that abortion rates are falling in this country. So, but
that's
not
mainly because there are so many, like RU486. There are so many over-the-counter now hormone pills that young women can take after they've had sex,
or Plan B now is now over the counter. RU486 is the abortion pill. I don't think that's over the counter, but
Plan B is.
Sorry, yeah, Plan B.
That's again, women are taking this into their own hands without even having.
I think women are trying to take it into their own hands, but the Republicans keep holding Congress hostage over this issue repeatedly. And
so is that progress or not?
No, it isn't. I mean, I think it's holding the women's rights movement here back because we're fighting for a right that is still legal, but it's completely inaccessible to the majority of women in this country. This UN, what's it called, Observation Committee was just here, team was just here, and they were shocked at the situation of women's rights.
They were shocked because one of them was from Poland, and the Poland abortion laws are the laws that the conservatives in this country are working
over abortion. It wasn't only abortion, it was about pay, it was about maternal
pay,
leave.
Which is due to choices, not discrimination.
But America is one of the few industrialized countries in the world where maternal mortality rates are rising. That's a problem. That goes beyond abortion.
All right, now let's switch to race. Obviously, the big race issue this year. Well, there are two towards the with immigration and Trump, but the bigger one that dominated much of the year was Ferguson, white policemen shooting black young men and killing them. And before a year or two ago, before Ferguson, nobody knew about this. So are we making, and yet it still keeps happening.
Well, what we've made progress on is really seeing what the state of relations is between law enforcement and particularly low-income and African-American males. We've seen high rates of incarceration over the years with African-American males, and I think seeing that police brutality is a problem in certain enclaves such as Baltimore, where we learned this past week that Freddie Gray's police, I guess you could say the police officer, who happened to be African-American as well, was led to a mistrial, essentially. And what we have seen here is that we need to confront this issue head on, because our law enforcement is there to protect us, protect our rights, but they cannot get too powerful. And in certain communities, it's a problem.
But it's also nothing new. What happened this year, which was fascinating, is that we finally had video footage, real footage of what the black community has been saying for a really,
well,
really
we have
long
more than
time.
footage. There was a movement. the Black Lives Matter is a movement, and I think that's a big difference by moms. And the other thing, there's a lot of consensus of Republicans and Democrats on some of the sentencing reform that is necessary. And actually, there's a bill, I believe, that was out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, now going to the floor of the Senate on sentencing reform. And really, we need to reform our criminal justice system.
Right. We have an over-criminalization problem.
But we also have an over-privatized prison system, which lobbies, which takes money that should be going to governments and uses it to lobby Congress to privatize more prisons. That's a large reason why we have one of the highest incarceration rates, if not the highest.
12 million Americans go through
so many of them are nonviolent, and so many of them. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about Black Lives Matter is it is also kind of shining a light on some other issues that are affecting the African American community and criminal justice and all. So you had Eric Gardner kind of highlighting, in a way, ridiculous taxes on single cigarettes. You had Walter Scott highlighting problems in family court, whereas this cycle of men who can't afford to pay child support just keep getting put in prison, and then they lose their job and they further can, and then it's just a continuous cycle. So you had these kind of separate issues that are now also kind of coming to light, because criminal justice, the issues and the problems with it, it's not just cops shooting black men. Like, there are so many problems.
Well, do we think we'll see any, you mentioned the bill, will we see reform? How will this affect women in prison? They're, of course, the fastest growing population in prison because, men have been the vast majority for most over time.
Yes. I mean, I think there is, again, a movement that is beyond just demonstration, but, seeing specific proposals in Congress. I'm very optimistic that we're actually going to see a change in the sentencing laws.
Absolutely.
I was optimistic, but now, I read something recently that, yes, Black lives matter, but Black witness doesn't matter. So even if we have this evidence and this footage, it doesn't really make a difference in the sentencing.
But at least criminal justice reform is one of the most true bipartisan issues right now. Republicans very big into it, Democrats very big into it, for slightly different reasons, but overall on the same page. So
all right, let's switch last thing to immigration. What does Donald Trump and raising the issue and then running, for the most part, way ahead of the rest of the Republican pack on because of his raising the question of immigration, not only in terms of Hispanics, but also, putting a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants. Your thoughts? Is this progress or regression?
It's total regression for people of color and of different faiths. I understand many of the principles this country was founded on are Judeo-Christian principles, and we embrace that, but there's separation of church and state here. Religious liberty is true here for a reason, and I think what Mr. Trump has done is endangered that entirely. He's left the door open for everybody to start really making these remarks about any race, about anybody that commits, crimes against fellow citizens, just because they happen to be Muslim
extremists. But why is he so popular then?
That is what I find really terrifying as a Muslim, and I mean, it's so terrifying what he's saying, but the response and the reaction from his supporters and the crowd is even more terrifying. I mean, I don't think I've ever been scared in this country the way I am now, and I feel like there's a total gendered impact of this anti-Muslim rhetoric and climate, and I feel like women who veil and wear the hijab are disproportionately being affected, and I think Donald Trump is dangerous. It's dangerous.
And I hope this is a wake-up call, Bonnie, particularly for people that care for those communities and people like me. I'm also from the Latino community, and those statements have been extremely painful for us. We need to mobilize. We need to get engaged.
Unacceptable.
That's the lesson.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To The Contrary. From activism to lactivism. Is breastfeeding all that? Political science professor Courtney Young's new book, Lactivism, describes the mommy wars and political activism caused by what she calls the lactivist movement that, whether intentionally or not, she claims shame new mothers who didn't breastfeed. Professor Young, who did breastfeed, also exposes how medicine, politics, religion, Feminism, big business, race, and class fueled breastfeeding activism. Breastfeeding is widely accepted by parents and doctors as the best food for babies. Campaigns and initiatives tout multiple health and bonding benefits, encouraging moms to breastfeed, even offering incentives. In 2012, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Centers for Disease Control declared the failure to breastfeed a public health issue.
You have breastfeeding being gradually redefined as pumping breast milk so that somebody else feeds your baby from a bottle. That turns breastfeeding into an industry. It means that, breast pump manufacturers are making a lot of money out of extolling the benefits of breastfeeding, or rather extolling the benefits of breast milk. We have a surplus of human milk in the United States. So now we have a large, growing, unregulated market in human milk.
79% of American mothers initiate breastfeeding. 49% are still breastfeeding at 6 months. Parents who, for a variety of reasons, make the personal choice to bottle feed often feel stigmatized for that decision.
15% of women actually cannot produce enough milk to feed their babies. There are other women who can't breastfeed because they need to return to work right away. And some women who simply prefer not to breastfeed.
All right, so Rina, who just had a baby a couple of weeks ago, do you sense any war between breastfeeding and non-breastfeeding new moms?
Between the mothers who breastfeed and who don't breastfeed, I think there's a lot of judgment. Is there an emerging war? I'm not sure, but I think there's a great deal of judgment that has led mothers who do not breastfeed, who exclusively pump, as I do, to feel worse about themselves. I think I've been shamed in these couple of weeks for not putting my child at the breast.
By your family?
By
lactation
the public? Consultants, by friends, who I thought were friends, because this is a time where a mother needs a lot of support, and it's really a mother's decision at the end of the day to say, I want to do exclusively formula, or I want to exclusively pump, or I want to just exclusively put my child at the breast and let her or him, basically get whatever they can get. For me, this is a lifestyle choice, and that's okay.
Why the big difference between, now I'm child free by choice, so I don't have a dog in this fight, as they say. But why would one mother care if another mother chooses
I never
to
experienced anything like that to that extreme. I never experienced anything like that. The reason I breastfed was because they told me the poop would not smell. And I'm like, okay, I don't want the poop to smell. Let me breastfeed. Of course, there are a lot of other benefits from breastfeeding, and it's a good thing. But, I couldn't breastfeed completely. I gave formula. I never felt judged because I got formula. My problem was the formula was very expensive.
I think there's something. The struggle is real, and I think in the past couple of years it's been intensifying. The mommy wars now, I think, encapsulate everything from what school your kid's gonna go to is that food organic, to are you breastfeeding? I mean, it's so bad. I remember I breastfed for 3 months. Now I'm telling everybody on national TV, and then I had so many medical issues. My doctors wanted me to stop breastfeeding because I was on various different kinds of medication. I'll never forget, I'm in CVS buying some Infamil, and this woman, she was a stranger. She came to me. She was like, don't give your baby formula. I'm like, who are you? This is so weird. I mean, I never care about what complete strangers are feeding their kids. It's incredible, the judgment, the pressure. It just gets worse.
It just comes from a judgmental society. I don't have kids. I'm the only one of the panelists that don't have children. But, it just comes from... I do. Cats. This judgmental society that we have to tell other people what we know best for everybody else, but
doesn't it usually surround pregnant women and breastfeed?
It really does.
Do men not only get that kind of judgment?
Do other moms judge, if you're not breastfeeding or whatever, but if you are breastfeeding and then you go out in public and breastfeed and then you're judged there,
exactly.
and you get looked at or whatever. But if you're on a train with a formula, nobody says anything. But it's just you can't win.
Let's talk about the roots of all of this. We need to talk about the roots roots, which was when the formula was sold in Africa, and there was exploitation in the
China had danger.
Yes, because our
formula.
mother's generation, my mother didn't breastfeed. You know, it was formula. That was the thing to do in her generation. So when the scandal came about and they started the boycott of Nestle because of the formula, and then breastfeeding became the thing, and the studies came about, and then it's like to the other extreme. Please avoid the formula at all costs.
Well, it's also stylish now. Breastfeeding is the new black in a way, because it's meant to sort of show that, look, I can kind of do it all. I'm breastfeeding by pressure. I'm married to a physician who went to medical school at a time where breast is best was pushed down the throats of these doctors who were being trained. And so I did this as a joint decision with my husband. I said, I'll do this because I do agree with you. There are a lot of benefits to breastfeeding. But I also understand the millennial mothers who lie and say that my child did not latch, and they go straight to formula because they are making that lifestyle decision, and that's okay. I understand where they're coming from.
But you know what amazes me, what you said, is that there's also judgment between women who breastfeed and women who pump, so that their own milk is going to the child anyway. What's the difference between those two?
There isn't, and there are studies, there are very few that show that there is some benefit to having the child at the breast, but not big enough to say that, look, if it's not working for you, if it's not something you want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and admit, I really found it to be really difficult this past 2 weeks, and so my husband and I made the decision that if I pumped, at least she's getting the milk.
All right, wonderful. Behind the headlines, Dr. Jane Goodall, the world-renowned primatologist known for her extensive work with chimpanzees, is also focusing on women's health and the environment.
Let me start, obviously, as I began, which was having a childhood dream, getting out to Africa, meeting the late Louis Leakey, having the opportunity to go and study chimpanzees who happened to be our closest living relatives.
Dr. Jane Goodall is the foremost expert on chimpanzees. Her research at Gombe Stream National Park taught us that chimps and humans share genetic and behavioral characteristics. Today, she spends her time advocating for animals and the environment. Her target audience, young people and women.
I think women traditionally, you know, they have a greater feeling for the land. Most of the rural women are farmers and tend the land. They understand the importance of conservation, fresh water.
Goodall fears increasing population and overuse, or what she calls theft, of our finite natural resources are unsustainable.
The big question is, how is it possible that the most intellectual creature to ever walk planet Earth is destroying its only home?
Goodall travels nearly 300 days a year. A recent trip to the U.S. included a presentation at the State Department on the intersection between gender, health, and conservation.
Women play such a very important role in society, and certainly in rural areas of Africa, which I'm most familiar with, you know, the women are they support the family.
Goodall's love for the chimpanzees led to her work on women's health and conservation. At the turn of the 20th century, there were 1 million chimpanzees in the wild. Today, there are fewer than 300,000. The main reason is destruction of their habitat.
When I flew over the Gombe National Park, which is very small, it's only about 30 square miles, I wasn't prepared to look down at completely bare hills stretching for miles in all directions where there had been thick forest. And that's when I realized there were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. And so how could we even try to save the chimpanzees when people around the edge of the forest were living in such difficult circumstances?
That's when the Takare program, a community-centered conservation effort, was created.
A very important component of that program was working with women in health, education of their children, and family planning.
Another important component was microcredit.
They have to select environmentally sustainable projects for the tiny loans that they take out. Empowering women turned out to be one of the best things we did, because all around the world it's been shown that as family size decreases, that it decreases as women become better educated. So this holistic approach to really conservation worked.
In just 10 years, the hillside changed from looking like this to this. Goodall founded the Jane Goodall Institute to engage as many people as possible in conservation.
Everybody should be embracing environmental issues, and that's why I'm so passionate about our youth program, Roots and Shoots. That program is inspiring young people, and from a very early age, helping them to understand the importance of the environment.
The Goodall Institute spent close to 30 years focusing on improving not only the communities surrounding ape habitats, but environments worldwide. She says we need to look beyond sustainability.
We've got to restore what's gone, not sustain what's left. If we just ask ourselves, how does this impact the environment, or has it involved human suffering? Has it involved cruelty to animals? How far away has it come? How much fossil fuel has been involved in bringing it to me? And, so if billions of people make wise choices in what they eat, what they wear, how they travel, how they save water and energy and so forth, then we move into the sort of world that we really must each strive to create if we care at all about the future.
That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. We wish you all a happy holiday. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the Oak Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the L. Hibri Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary. Be more PBS.